This is Talking My Walking. I am Rodrigo Ribeiro, and today I'm going to talk about the need for a culture of holistic integration. Whether we admit it or not, we are conditioned by a culture of individualistic, mindless consumption, a very shallow, a culture of shallowness, a culture of separation that nevertheless has a global, globally standardized. It doesn't matter where you go. There are cultural differences and civilizational differences, but there is a uniformization in a pattern. There are patterns that tells us that we can recognize those patterns because they are the same everywhere. They have been spread by the American culture. It was part of the imperialistic cultural, the idea of spread, the imperialistic culture, American consumption culture, as the paradigm to follow and to make people dependent. This we do not. Most of the time, we do not see this as part of a strategy for dependency, but it is a strategy for dependency. Culture is used also to create addictions and habits that change our behavior, but changes how we think, changes how we perceive reality, and it's not by chance that that most of us have just very shallow understanding and fragmented understanding of reality. And this is by design. This is part of the of a system that controls by dividing, that requires dividing to control. This individualistic, mindless consumption culture is global, but it doesn't mean, of course, there are pockets of resistance, and it's not the same reality in every country because of several because of idiosyncratic problems of each country or the circumstances of every country, but nevertheless, that's the default culture. That's the point. It's a default culture, and we sometimes don't even notice it. We don't notice how much, how deep we are influenced, and our perception and behaviors and identity is shaped by this culture. Sometimes many of us don't even understand what culture really means, what culture is. Culture is not what we produce. Culture is culture. The main, the core of culture is not exactly what kind of books we produce of, or what kind of intellectual. It has to do with it, of course, but culture, it's what shapes who we are. It's what is behind what we believe. It's our reality. That's how we make sense of ourselves. That's how we understand the world. A culture doesn't exist outside. Culture exists in us, in living organisms that are social and need need cooperation to survive as a species. This culture was spread by the American imperialists, of course, for because of the need to expand to new markets, but also, especially the movies were highly influential in shaping the global culture that we have today. Of course, now this global culture of individualistic mindless consumption is not anymore controlled by the US. It's already the umbilical cord has been cut because of many, especially because of the rise of China, but also because of many other circumstances of historic evolution. But the culture persists. This culture persists, and it is a culture that it is pervasive everywhere. It is connected with the idea of economic growth, associated with human development. There is this association, this connection that it is required because it's part of the economic paradigm that needs to be protected, and we do not. And again, I have to always go back to Tina, because the idea is that associated with this paradigm is the idea that there is no alternative. Many of us don't see or feel the need for change, and many others just they feel helpless. The reality of their lives just make them there's helplessness everywhere, which means that many people think and feel that there is nothing they can do to change reality. There is no way. Why? Because they are trapped in the individualistic perception of reality. So this culture of separation, of atomization, just makes we feel about our lives, and we do not see how can we get away. I mean, be free ourselves from this domination, for the domination of this dominant culture, because that's the economic and financial instruments that keep us, that's the manufacturer scarcity that keeps us under control. Because it's very difficult to find people with whom you really engage in a creative and constructive conversation, in terms that people go to the bottom of because that's we need at this point in time. We need to go to the bottom of the issues. We cannot solve the problems at the same level same level of thought that we created them, or others created them for us, because this is the reality. It's not us that created the problems. That's what they want us to think, that it is our fault, while they are profiting and the wealth gap just grows. And we blame each other, and we blame this and that, and we scapegoating, like always, as so many people just take it for its face value. So many people just stating that the problem is the left. What left? There is since when the West doesn't have a left? That the real left, has any political power. I'm not going to discuss the reasons why, but I mean, it's such a stupid idea that people fall so easily when these populists, these opportunists, these political opportunists tell us that everything, is the problem of the left. Immigration is the problem of the left. It's not a problem of the liberals. Yeah, it's a problem. It's a problem that has been created by the left, the liberals, and the Christian Democrats, and also the Social Democrats. It was not created by the left. The left was not involved in these policies. The left is, it has to be against the most policies that have been implemented over decades. The real left. Unless people want to believe that neoliberal politics and economics is left. Unless people want to believe that Obama or Clinton or are left, are people that have been, they might be progressive liberals in some issues, but other than that, it's the same. There has been in Europe. There was a social democratic. The social democracy was important in the European societies and to shape the European economies. And people are still enjoying the benefits of it, but it's decades already since these parties, they were not left, but at least they had some left policies, which we have to recognize, the progressive policies. But since decades, they have been colonized by neoliberals. These parties, and there's still these people calling them left parties. And people buy it. That's the problem is because people do buy it. But the problem is not because we are not able, or many of us are not able to understand these issues intellectually. Of course we can, and we are. The problem is that we kind of separate ourselves from that reality, which means that most of the time we tend to believe automatically that they don't affect us. But they do. Unless it requires a process, a conscious process of really thinking it through until a different narratives become dominant in our mind, in our subconscious minds. That's how we change, because I want to repeat it again and again, because we need to understand it. That when people change, that change doesn't come just because we can intellectually understand that our belief system was wrong, or has some issues with it. It's not as how we managed it, but it only changes when it's replaced. It's not replaced when a new narrative, when a new belief system becomes dominant, and then the other one just goes into the memory hole, let's put it this way. Okay, it stays there, it doesn't go anywhere, because we don't get rid of things as we imagine. We don't clean ourselves. Things stay with us. That's why we sometimes don't remember things for decades, and suddenly they just pop up. Do you believe they were where? They are part of us. They will be part of us forever. Of course, there are experiences in life, and everything is an experience. Everything is part of is processed by a living organism. Okay, it's not. It is therefore is an experience. Our thoughts are experiences, are organic experiences. Okay, they happen, and they happen in a body, in a living organism. And they are, of course, influenced by the state of the organism, by the feelings and everything, by everything that is going on with that living organism that is living in processing the intern process, and that at the same time processing the relationship of that living organism with the external world. You know, that is part of our experience. So that's why we sometimes we think that we are not affected, but we are. We are affected. There are many things that we do not give much relevance, but still they have a toll on us. You know, because it's not about what we don't need to be conscious about everything that influences us, but we need to be conscious in order to. It is part of a conscious process when you want to change yourself. When you want to intentionally change yourself, you have to train yourself. Because this is a cultural process, a bio-social culture process that happens inside of your brain, inside of your body, inside of your subconscious mind, but is consciously undertaken. That's how we, or taken. I'm not sure. You just have to excuse my English, but I think I can. My thoughts are, if not clear, at least understandable. That's why it's not enough just intellectual understanding. It requires a process of intentional consciousness that we practice ourselves, that we want to understand. We in order to make it effective, that it becomes part of who we are, we need to do it consciously until it becomes predominant in our brains, until it gains a grip in ourselves, in our identity. Otherwise, we just understand it intellectually, and then just life goes on. That's how we work. What I mean is that we have to intentionally think about a new culture, a culture of liberation, a culture of unity, a culture of cooperation, a culture of holistic uh, holistic integration. Humanity, we, and by we I mean the whole humanity, needs that culture. Needs a culture to replace the dominant culture that, as I said, is a culture based on division, mindless, individualistic consumption that is that makes us consume what we don't need with the money for many of us at least, with the money we don't have, to impress people that we don't even like, and for what? That we just don't have the time, nor the energy, nor the interest in developing a different culture and a different understanding of our own selves. And we just, because we tend to believe that we are different from others. Again, I have to point it out, because it is. We always think that we are different from. We are much more. We are smarter. I mean, if you know that. The people that are most stupid usually is the ones that think they know everything. They don't need to think. They don't need to analyze. They don't need to study. You know, that's it's just they just know. They read the headlines and they listen to some pundits or to the night news, and that's it. You know, we don't know. Many of us, unfortunately, don't understand how deep indoctrinated and propagandized we are. In a daily basis, why it works. It works exactly because it is in a daily basis. And we are born in and raised in this culture. And this culture is not humanizing us. Just by the way, just because we are we are a social species. So social relations are crucial for our. It's not because we need to be social, okay? Please don't think that you need to socialize a lot in order, because you are a social being. No, you need to have relations, social relations that are meaningful and have a purpose. That they just are for the purpose of creating well-being for all of us, while respecting the other living beings and the rest and nature in general. Not because many people, they do have a very busy social life, you know, but it's the kind of social life where people are that is commodified, that is deeply commodified. It's based on convenience. It's based on what do I have to gain or lose. Even among friends and family members. Because it is the mindset that is the dominant mindset that the default dominant mindset, the default mindset. And we just that's how we live. And by social beings, exactly, we need human relations, in that interdependency. We are interdependent, and we need the connection with each other but we need to feel the connection. Social relations can be that do not connect us. They are doing more worse than good. And by the way, it is also a waste of time. And I think everybody understands that time is life. What we do with our lives should matter. With our time should matter. We cannot. That's why there is nothing. There is no correlation between the sophistication of a culture. A society can be culturally sophisticated and technologically advanced, and nevertheless be a dysfunctional and dehumanizing culture. And that's exactly what I believe is the situation. What is true for political agency is true for cultural agency, which means that the environment where we expect that others are the ones that are responsible for creating culture, as I said, the Hollywood movies were used to spread the American culture, culture that was supposed to be the beacon of what a society and an economy should look like. They were. It is. We need to understand that these movies were political. They might not seem like that, but they were political in the sense they were intentionally spreading ideas and narratives to transform and to influence the minds of people of every age and walk of life everywhere in the world. And it was also the network of radio stations everywhere, and many other campaigns that were used, because usually that is not only a single the strategy. This imperialistic strategy, where it was used a lot of different tools in order to be more effective. And of course, what is the idea was to use catch phrases and concepts like freedom and democracy associated with consumption, associated with that ridiculous superfluous consumption that was going on in America, that in order to impress people in other parts of the world that could not access that kind of consumption levels, conspicuous consumption, that was not possible for most people around the world. After the Second World War, America was responsible for more than half of the economic output in the world. The Americans had the political tools, the economic and financial resources, and also the human resources, because they could pay and bribe, and there was and use the permanent bureaucracy, the CIA, and cutouts to together with the British, especially the British. That's why many people call it the Anglo-American Empire, which makes sense. Um, so, in spite of the opposition or the Cold War, the Soviet Union didn't have the resources to be a competitor to the United States in influence. So we cannot compare both the Soviet Union and the ability for the Soviet Union and the United States, because there was two different realities in economic and financial, and the institutions. I have to remember that the institutions that were created in Bretton Woods conference, they were in favor of the American empire. They had the purpose to to transform the dollar into the world currency. So we cannot compare the situation and the ability of these two adversaries, because it was incomparable. It's not like the same today, because we have the Chinese that are in a position that they can really challenge the power of the United States, and especially together using the BRICS, together with Russia, they can really be a challenge for the United States imperialism. But the institutions that the international system, the international financial and economic system, is still dominated by the West. It's in decline, but it's still the dominant institutions are controlled by the West. What I'm trying to convey is that the culture, still the dominant culture, that is pervasive everywhere and in every corner of Earth, is still the American imperialistic culture. And it is a culture that, as I said, that in my opinion is a culture that doesn't serve humanity interests as a whole. It unifies us in terms of consumption patterns and behavior patterns. So we reproduce the imperialistic behaviors that serve the imperialist interests, but not our interests as people and as a species, because we are talking about a culture of individualistic, mindless consumption that was designed to atomize us, to divide us, not to make us think only as individual interests. So not focused in the social relations, not focused in the social well-being, besides our families. And even with our families, you know that there are many dysfunctionalities, family dysfunctionalities, and you can observe it in America, for example, that have nothing to do with the cultural and gender culture wars and gender wars. It has to do with the political and economic system that exists in America that affects deeply how people related to each other. And that's the reality behind the other reality. That's a structural reality that people unfortunately dismiss or intentionally omit or think doesn't exist. But it does exist. It does exist, and it deeply affects the behavior and the perception and relations, human relations. So every movement or organization, political, cultural, environmental, or whatever, needs to take this reality into account, which means that for a true economy, true political economy, that in my perspective has to be a social and ecological economy. It is for civilization, an ecological holistic civilization, because that's what I believe we need for the well-being of humanity and the preservation of the ecosystem, of the Earth ecosystem, not ours. They are not ours. We should not own them. We should abolish that perspective of ownership of everything, even of stewardship, because it gives us the sense of superiority that is part of this culture, of this imperialistic culture. The primacy of ownership, of this superior. This is nothing to do with our condition. That's something that people should understand in my humble perspective, because that's another aspect of the dominant culture that makes everything look as if it is part of the human condition and there is nothing we can do about it. It's a defect. It's part of our innate condition. No, it is not. We don't need a culture. We do not need, and it is very nefarious to endorse and to promote and to implement and to allow a culture that intentionally, consciously or unintentionally and subconsciously makes us feel and think and perceive ourselves as superior beings, as the ones that have the role of managing everything, and by the way, everyone, because then we do believe that we are entitled to manage and dominate not only the resources and nature and every single piece of this earth, of the planet Earth, but also our fellow citizens. And that's why we need a comprehensive understanding, an holistic understanding of the problems, because otherwise we lose perspective. We just become influenced. And I mean, we all have our tendencies, okay? We cannot avoid that. But we, in order that the idiosyncratic syntheses do not dominate our perception of the world, which means that we just have a kind of very narrow understanding and picture of reality, we need to cultivate consciously. That's the point. It needs to be a conscious process that is trained in order to transform us into holistic and to have an holistic analysis. Complex system, transcontextual analysis. And this is a political. That's because, in spite of we cannot be right or left or whatever you think you should be in the political spectrum. We need to culturally have an understanding, an holistic understanding, that in order that we avoid fundamentalism, because what matters is the best for all of us, is not just, and again, it's not about the culture we need is not a culture of followism. It's a culture of agency, but agency with the perspective of the well-being and equality for all of us. When I talk about well-being and equality, of course I expand it to everything. We need a culture of idealistic realism, which means that idealism is important, because we need to have ideals. We need to, because we have to think about that reality is a process. It's not something that we can keep standing still. It's not a picture in the wall. Okay? It is an ideal, and so as an ideal, we need to understand that we have an ideal, and we have that. We should keep that ideal not as a god, but as a perspective, as a path, that humanity should follow as a whole, because now we live in times where we cannot think, because that's why nationalism doesn't make any sense these days, because most countries in the world could not survive by themselves, because they do not have the resources that complex societies require in order to survive. I'm not talking about that we are going to go back to nature. Therefore, we need. If these complex technological societies are not going anywhere unless we destroy everything through war. But other than that, they are going to be part of our lives. Therefore, what we need is not to abolish technology, because it would be absurd at this point in time in our history, but it's to use it with a purpose That's why, with the purpose of serving humanity, not being used to create tech billionaires and to maybe be the destruction of life on Earth and for transhumanistic purposes and other absurdities, and delusional. This is part of a delusional hubris that is also in the part of the dominant culture for profit. Okay? That's why this ideal, we need the idealistic realism is exactly the point, that we have a culture that has that understands life and everything as a process, and the ideal is just to keep life, to keep the dignity of life, to preserve and respect the dignity of life. That should be the ideal. Not for dominance, not for conquer, not to create billionaires, not to have a culture that emphasizes and glorifies the inequality and wealth accumulation and private control of everything. Do you think that this trend will benefit humanity? It will not. For most of us, it will be. We will be. The point is that we just is the same. Is the patterns of control, top-down control, that are being exacerbated in this moment of our history, especially in the Western countries, because we are in decline. Our societies are in decline, and the world is in transition. That's why we are living the times of monsters. As Gramsci said. So we need a culture that doesn't confuse sovereignty with nationalism. Because I'm all for sovereignty. I think countries need sovereignty, because it is part of the identity of the protecting the nation and the state and the self-governance. But that respect for sovereignty has nothing to do with nationalism. Nationalism usually has a toxic element on it, xenophobic. So it's not recommended. And by the way, there are many ways to deal with the immigration problem. Okay? And we need to be internationalists, because we have, whether we like it or not, or we agree with it or not, we have a global economy, and we need and that global economy, unless it's going to be disrupted with war, don't think that just these tariff wars and the people that tell globalization is dead and blah blah blah. The global trade is growing, okay? Because the world is bigger than the West, in spite of all the power that the West still has. All right? The point is, We need a global culture, a culture that understands an internationalist culture, and institutions that promote cooperation, and cooperation that is based on the transference of technology and and education. Because if we need skilled workers, that the countries that are behind, let's put it this way, they need educated people that are able to handle the transference of technology. Because again, if the countries that the countries that are in debt, they cannot pay the debt if they only produce low value added products and goods for the international markets, commodities for the international markets. They will be not growing economically. They will be always in disadvantage because they have to import goods and services with high value added. Therefore, they always have the lower end. They cannot develop economically. It's not about growing in numbers. It's about development, human and economic and societal development. A global holistic culture needs to have all the points that I made into consideration, because as it goes for politics, it goes for culture. You cannot separate it. It is in everything. You know, there is no economic theory or economic practice or economic system that is not based, that is not cultural, ideological, and political. So, culture, and we need to be able to decipher the codes, to decipher the messages that are carried in the narrative, that are spread with the narratives. That's why we need a culture that of unification, in terms that if we have a comprehensive understanding of our complex realities, it's not easy, but it is required. Either we want to be, what I mean in my daily thoughts is that we should not talk about freedom and democracy without political and cultural agency. And cultural and agency is always about conscious. You need to be conscious of we cannot be, we are always reproducing adaptive behaviors. We are adapting to stimuli instead of being part of the process, and that is the opposite of freedom, and also the opposite of democracy, because we are supposed to obey, even if we think if there is free choice, which is very conditioned. It's not really free, but that free choice is part of a obedience pattern that we are following patterns that have been created by others, and we just have the opportunity, the hypothesis to choose. But even that choice, as I said, is not completely free, because it results from subconscious processes that by themselves and in spite of being in spite of happening in our inside of our organism, they are not ours. And that's the point, because we are bits and pieces of other people's experiences and knowledge, which means that we are, what we really are is always a collective being. And it matters a lot who had the more influence on us and why. Why does we, I mean, because the influences are not all good, even those, the ones that we open our heart and minds. It many times it happens because of we feel that feels well with us, or that reinforces our belief systems, or that fulfills a need, or whatever it is the reason. It has nothing to do with truth and justice, as I said before, and that's why we need a totally different culture. A culture that that helps us to, that instigates us, that makes us feel the need to have a critical analysis and to have agency, not being only, because most of our agency as citizens and as human beings has been hijacked by the culture of individualistic mindless consumption. And that's the point, you know. That's why we are we almost are not able to recognize anything else, and we are very delusional, and we don't see ourselves, and we don't perceive ourselves, of course. Because, as I said before, we always think that we can, that we are able to see things through without any deep reflection or learning or connection or context. And then we are permanently being abused because abused, deceived, you know, and we are being deceived in a comprehensive way, because the ones that create these deceptions, they know what they are doing. They have the knowledge, they have the money, they have the resources. I mean, they can pay to the human resources. That's what the PR industrial complex is for, is to keep us on a loop of deception, of permanent deception and delusion. But they use all the tools available, all the tools that science produces, and all the technological advances, they use them against us to control us. But somehow we believe that without any effort, without any study and intentional awareness, we understand. We can. We are not deceived, but of course we are, because exactly the main culture, the dominant culture, was tailored for that. Is always in the process of perfection, that ability of the culture and the dominant powers to control us, to control society as a whole, but also to control us individually. To start with our by isolating us, by atomizing us, by denying us our the nature, the innate nature, the innate need for true social relations. That's to start with. And then to use all forms of distractions, infotainment, to shallowness that just keeps us only focused in our interests, and because everything around us is commodified, and we are addicted. Convenience is a form of addiction. It makes us weak. It makes us dependent. And you just are more and more enslaved, not more and more free by any means. And if we think we are, again, is part of the delusion, is not part of any conscious awareness of what is at stake, what was behind our thoughts and ideas and perceptions. That requires, again, study and the development of techniques and training in understanding how human beings really work, how our brains really work. A global holistic culture that at the same time is focused on individual liberation and collective well-being, and that we can work on that, because again, as I said yesterday, I do not agree with the idea that human beings are obsolete. We are not obsolete. There are people trying to convince us that we are obsolete. And that is again another deception for control. That's why we don't, that's why we need this imperialistic culture, global culture that dominates our lives, that it has a really grip on us, is also trying to convince us that is for our the transhumanism is inevitable, because we need to be able to adapt to the advancements in technology, to the technological advancements. So therefore, technological advancements are more important than human beings itself, to the preservation of human beings, and that we should have human beings more conscious of many things, as I'm trying to convey as I can, the best I can, that we should know. Instead of that, we have to learn and to understand in a holistic way our human condition, and how we can build a different culture that serves us and without destroying nature and without the need to change ourselves in order to adapt to the needs of technology, because technology is developed by people with interests and they do not have our best interests at heart. It's about control and power and money, and that's about, which means it's about imperialistic civilization. It's about keeping the paradigm, the imperialistic civilization paradigm. It's not about saving anything. It's not about saving nature. It's not about saving civilization. It's the same mindset. It's the same paradigm, and this is exactly the culture that we need to fight, because we are not obsolete. What we need is a totally different culture. But that culture can only be born out of consciousness, out of the consciousness of the evilness, I would say it like that, out of the dysfunction, out of the understanding of how dysfunctional our culture is. And I'm talking about the global imperialist culture that has very long roots in the past, but I'm talking about the one that was spread by the United States of America and is pervasive all over the world. And that culture is exactly the one that is shaping our behavior and our understanding of reality. And it's telling us now that we are obsolete, that we are the ones responsible for the Anthropocene, that we might need that we need to depopulate, but in a way that who is going to be depopulated, who is going to be killed, who are the ones that need, who are against, it's about superiority, who are the ones that are, that represent the highest breed to be preserved. This is not rhetorical questions. This is questions that we need to ask ourselves, because humanity is in trouble in a multidimensional and at multi levels, and they have been caused by the imperialistic mindset. And that's why without that cultural revolution, but it's the revolution. It's not a revolution without the spread consciousness that has to be at the individual level. It doesn't work, because then we tend to go back to allow the same forces to regain power again. So you need to have a idealistic reality, a culture that is based on consciousness and equality. The consciousness, it's not consciousness separated from reality, it's always relational. Anything I say is relational. It cannot be understood outside of that perspective. But this culture is required for the probably for the continuation of humanity. I will. This is not. This is not the whole picture of this issue. I just think it's important. It's one of the important themes that we need to understand of our reality, of our societal, cultural, and civilizational reality. It, at least as I understand it, this is not. This is. I think this is important to study and to think about. I will come back to it in another opportunity. I always feel that I never know what I'm going to talk about next, because it just happens that I just like to feel free that I don't pick up a subject, a theme, but it just comes kind of spontaneously, and then I just feel I just do my best. Okay, thanks for listening. I will back soon.